interventions during pregnancy, natal and postnatal care. So this SMCOC includes a minimum 8 or more antenatal care, skilled attendance during birth, and a postnatal care visit held by health professionals within 48 hours of delivery. So this study addresses the research gap by taking into account the revised version of COC. Further, Kalimpong is a newly created district in northern West Bengal, and it was carved out of Darjeeling on 24th February 2017. However, there is no separate data for Kalimpong district till date. So this research will be the base study that lays the groundwork for further studies to build upon. So the major objective of this study is to understand the utilization of COC in the study area and to identify the risk factor associated with it. So coming to the methodology, the study makes use of primary data, and the survey was conducted between 20th November 2023 to 28th June 2024. And the data was collected using schedules, and the schedule was prepared by reviewing relevant literatures, and the target population for mother having children less than 5 years old, and 380 sample size was determined using Cron's formula with 95% CI and 5% margin of error. However, to gather more required information, a total 407 samples was collected and was used in the study. So PPS sampling sampling technique was used to determine the villages and forest villages. And these are the list of villages which I have visited for data collection. So coming to result, you can see that 25.8% women utilize Quantum 1. So Quantum 1 here is 8 or more antenatal care visit. Further, 25.1% women utilize Quantum 2. So Quantum 2 is 8 or more antenatal care visit plus skilled attendance during delivery. And the last one, Quantum 3, is 25.1%, which is the full SMCOC, and it includes 8 or more antenatal care visit, plus skilled attendance during birth, and postnatal care provided by skilled health professionals within 48 hours of delivery. This bar diagram shows the percentage distribution of sample by background attributes. So you can see the utilization of SMCOC is higher among women who dwells in village and has been living in joint family, who are of Christian faith, who are of ST category, and who has a female as the household head, and whose income and whose family income is more. Further, the utilization of this SMCOC is higher among the elderly women with education, higher education, and women who are working, who has exposure to mass media, who has self-healthcare autonomy, and women who are non-alcoholic. Further, we can see that place of delivery and second birth order of the child is positively related with utilization of SMCOC. Further, the utilization of SMCOC is higher among women who has educated husband, whose husband are working, and whose husband accompanied her during antenatal care visit, and whose husband does not consume alcoholic. Further, we can see that the prevalence of SMCOC is high among women who reported easy access to healthcare facilities and who were counseled by ASA about all aspects of pregnancy and who were visited by ASA many times or frequently during the pregnancy period. So this is the result of chi-square test. We can see that place of residence, religion, caste, household income, mother education, women alcohol consumption, exposure to mass media, healthcare autonomy, husband education, household alcohol consumption, access to health facilities, ASA counsel about all aspects of pregnancy, and number of times ASA visit during pregnancy is statistically significant, which means the p-value is less than 0.05. Hence, all the parameters are included in the regression model. So this is the forest plot which shows OR ratios. So we can see that Women dwelling in the forest village are less likely to use SMOC than the women who are living in the villages. Similarly, we can see that women who have a good or more this family income are more likely to use SMCOC than women who are economically deprived. Further, we can see that women who are more educated are more likely to use SMCOC than women who are illiterate or have lower educational level. Further, we can see that women who reported difficulties in accessing the healthcare facilities has higher odds of utilizing SMCOC than women who are having difficulties in accessing the healthcare facilities. Further, women who were visited by ASA and were counseled are more likely to use SMCOC than women who did not receive these services. So the major finding of my study is the utilization of SMCOC is very low in the study area. Women are more likely to utilize SMCOC if their household income is high, have better health care, better education, and have autonomy over their healthcare decision. Frequent ASA visit and counseling on all aspects of pregnancy, along with easy access to healthcare facilities, further improve SMOC utilization. So, although this study is very comprehensive, yet it has some limitations. So, the study fails to take into account the cultural barrier to obtain complete SMCOC, and women knowledge and attitude concerning SMCOC has not been taken into account in the study. Further, geographical factors in determining utilization of SMCOC has not been incorporated in the study. So, this is my conclusion and suggestions. So, this research has made an in-depth study about the unexplored rural area in context of utilization of SMCOC. So here are the few suggestions which should promote utilization of SMCOC in the study area. First one is to have a practical intervention targeted at increasing the complete SMOC in the study area. Further, we must educate women as well as encourage them so that they serve as a long-term approach for boosting SMCOC users. Further, we must build an environment which promotes women autonomy regarding her self-health care. Further, the finding indicates that the limitation to income and affordability are more distinct in explaining the utilization of full SMCOC. Therefore, the government should provide a monetary initiative to promote and guarantee utilization of SMCOC. Further, difficulty in accessing the healthcare facility may be reduced by improving transportation network and establishing quality health care centers at closer proximity. Further, more focus should be laid on the forest villages because they are the more deprived regions. And lastly, the work of ASA should be strengthened because in rural area, they act as a direct interface between expecting mother and health system. So these are my references, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. The presentation is now open for discussion. Questioning, sorry. Any questions from the audience? No? Then the judges, please.
So, Diksha, you have shown that ST population is utilizing healthcare facilities much more. What is the composition of population in Kalimpong and in your sample area, sample villages?
Okay, ma'am. Like the ST population is more in Kalimpong region, so the usage of SMCOC high, so the frequency is high out there.
How much? Like composition complete?
Like, I don't know the exact figure, how much ST population is there, but yeah, yeah. But we can see that out here, yeah. Mm.
Only one question.
Yeah, ST are utilizing more SC, like utilizing quantum of care more than the other caste, but it is not significant, ma'am, in the regression module.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We now would listen to Shankar Oraon. He will be speaking on decomposing the rural-urban gap in undernutrition among reproductive aged women in India, evidence from National Family Health Survey.
Excuse me. It's full screen. Full screen. No, from here, one people is for here. This is the one. Okay. You can see now. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, from here, no?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shankar Oraon. I am research scholar at Sikkim Central University. Today I am here to presenting my research work on the topic of decomposition the rural-urban gap in undernutrition among reproductive aged women in India. Evidence from National Family Health Survey 2019 to 21. This is the outline of my presentation. And coming to the introduction, undernutrition among reproductive aged women is a major public health concern in low and middle income countries, particularly in women living in Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan African countries. Undernutrition in women at reproductive age are associated with higher risk of maternal mortality, morbidity, increased risk of anemia, preterm birth, stillbirth, increased risk of higher neonatal mortality. Along with this, the women are also suffering from non-communicable disease, impairment of cognitive development, and reduce the economic productivity. Undernourished women are more likely to give birth to low birth weight newborns, and these newborns are higher risk of malnutrition, leading to intergenerational cycle of malnutrition. In India, despite economic growth and urbanization, urbanization among reproductive age women remains a persistent issue with a serious implication for both maternal and child health. India is slightly contributing to 1/3 of the global burden of undernutrition, where a quarter of women is suffering from undernutrition, and through the proportion of undernutrition is reducing from NFHS 4 to NFHS 5, but still the prevalence is higher in NFHS 5. Despite progress in reducing undernutrition among women, India is far behind towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which is reduce the all form of malnutrition by 2030. As mother nutrition is directly linked to the child nutrition, in NFHS 5 data it is shown that the significant rural-urban disparities is persisting in terms of neonatal mortality, infant mortality, and uncontrolled mortality rate. Coming to my objectives, the first objective is to assess the prevalence of undernutrition among reproductive age women in India. Second one is to identify the factors associated with undernutrition among reproductive age in India. And third one is to quantify and explain the rural-urban disparity in undernutrition among reproductive age in India. And data and source, I have used fifth round of National Family Health Survey data. The fifth round of National Family Health Survey provides data of around 7,24,115 women aged 15 to 49, and after excluding the pregnant women and missing values, the present sample size of this analysis is 6,71,743. And description of the variables, I have taken dependent variable as underweight. Those women are underweight, those women's BMI is less than 18.5 categorized as underweighted women, or those women are BMI is more than 18.5, they are categorized as normal. And my independent variables is respondent characteristics including age, marital status, education, anemia status, working status, and mass media exposure. And among household characteristics includes wealth index, place of residence, caste, and religion. And last one is region. Statistical analysis. Descriptive statistics were carried out to describe the sample distribution by the background characteristics of the respondent. Bivariate analysis were carried out to assess the prevalence of undernutrition among reproductive age women by rural and urban residents. And binary logistic regression method was used to examine the determinants of malnutrition among reproductive age women. And lastly, Fairlie decomposition method was used to quantify and explain the rural-urban disparity in undernutrition among reproductive age women in India. And this is the result of overview. Coming to the distribution, first one table 1 represents the sample distribution by their background characteristics, where you can see the around 32% of the sample belongs to urban population, and around 67% of the population belongs to rural residents. Coming to the prevalence of undernutrition among reproductive age women by rural and urban residents, by their background characteristics, in respect to all background characteristics, the rural area, the prevalence of underweight is high compared to urban counterparts. And coming to the result of binary logistic regression, here you can see that rural women are 1.060 times more likely to be underweighted in reference to urban women, and followed by in case of education and wealth quintile. With increasing the education status of women, the chances of being underweighted is reducing, and similarly in case of wealth quintile, with increasing the wealth quintile status, the prevalence of underweight is decreasing. And similarly in case of caste region, caste is not significantly associated with undernutrition. And coming to the region, the northeastern region is performing very well in terms of undernutrition among reproductive age women in India, and western region is very likely 1.79 is more likely to be underweight compared to northern region. Coming to the result of Fairlie decomposition method, and the table 5, this shows the Fairlie decomposition. Decomposition provides into the factors contributing to the disparity in undernutrition between rural and urban women. The mean prediction value of undernutrition among rural women is 0.21, and while for urban is 0.13. The observed difference is 0.08, and this observed difference is 81.41 is explained by observable factors, where wealth and education is a major determinant, and these variables are positively associated with the undernutrition. It means this variable is increasing the gap in undernutrition between rural and urban women. And age group and marital status are negatively associated with undernutrition. It means these are the variables that reducing the gap between undernutrition among rural and urban women. Coming to the key findings, the findings of this study highlight significant disparities in underweight prevalence among reproductive aged women in India. The prevalence of underweight is significantly higher in rural areas, which is 22.29% compared to urban counterparts. Result of logistic regression revealed that undernutrition among reproductive aged women is influenced by key variables like including age, education, marital status, employment index, anemia status, and mass media exposure. And the Fairlie decomposition results reveal that wealth and education are contributing as a significant predator, increasing the rural-urban gap in underweight prevalence among reproductive age women in India. However, factors such as marital status and age group contributes negatively to the disparity, suggesting that these variables are reducing the rural-urban gap in undernutrition prevalence. Coming to the conclusion, this study found significant rural-urban variation in the prevalence of underweight among reproductive age women in India. The findings suggest that rural-urban divide in undernutrition among women as India driven by largely socioeconomic inequalities, particularly wealth and education, therefore improving socioeconomic status of women. Further studies on socio-cultural practices, dietary practices, delivery, education for rural reproductive age women, and other related information is required to obtain for improvement of nutritional status among reproductive age women. And apart from that, India has a robust policy framework to address all forms of malnutrition, such as National Health Mission, Integrated Child Development Scheme, and Public Distribution System, and Poshan Abhiyan. Therefore, a possible cross-governmental coordination is needed at each level of the implementation of those programs for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 2, which includes the target to end all forms of malnutrition by 2030. These are my reference, and thank you.
Thank you. Questions, please, from the audience? The audience is silent. Yeah.
Use the variables of the religion in the equation.
Religion is categorized into three groups: Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and others.
So you use the code the same way?
This is category 1, 2, 3, 4 categorizes.
So you use the the coded variable in directly,
Yes, sir.
because it should be polynomial regression, not actually the normal logistic regression.
Sir, actually, my dependent variable is coded in binary, and
That is where actually the three nominal variables are there, no? Three religions are there, and you made it in the scale 1, 2, 3,
Yes, sir.
and that is not correct, isn't it?
You say you agree or do not agree?
Yes, sir. The religion is categorized into three groups, and other also variables are categorized into different categories. But my independent variable is dichotomous, which is like undernourished and not undernourished.
One more question. Judges, if no other person is interested to ask question, judges, please.
Okay. So why did you not include state as an independent variable?
Which one, sir?
State. Whatever your findings are there, will it be applicable for Meghalaya or Assam?
No, sir. In India.
So why did you not include state as an independent variable?
State.
Yes.
I missed that.
Control, whatever.
I have taken region as the independent.
Or one state as a reference category. For example, if you take Kerala as a reference category, what happens to the odd ratio of Bihar or Meghalaya? Odd ratio can be calculated. Okay?
Thank you. We now we would now invite Irshad Tharil as the third presenter to speak on spatial and non-spatial analysis of factors that influence unauthorized open dumping sites in Kalaburgi city, Karnataka.
Hello. Good evening all. I am myself Irshad Tarail from Central University of Karnataka. So here I am going to present my research topic titled Spatial Analysis of Factors that Influence Unauthorized Open Dumping Sites in Kalaburagi City, Karnataka. Just move on. So this is the introduction part of my study. So we know that what are the waste someone's remaining will be useful for, or something from the remains will be considered as a waste. So normally the urban areas worldwide face growing challenges in handling municipal solid waste. So in developing countries like India, the practice of open dumping of municipal solid waste presents a significant obstacle to implementing effective municipal solid waste management system. So here I am considering these open dumping sites. So open dumping sites can be defined as unauthorized locations where municipal solid waste is thrown or dumped. So here I used two techniques like ordinary least square regression or geographically weighted regression. Like ordinary least square regression globally considering, and geographical weighted regression will consider local analysis by integrating the special changes. So this is the current problem existing in the study area. Like unauthorized dumping of municipal solid waste is a significant problem in the Kalaburagi city. And this practice is primarily driven by various conditioning factors such as road network, commercial areas, religious places, educational institutions, parks, playgrounds, residential dwellings, and so on. And these unauthorized dumping practices of municipal solid waste leading to various environmental degradation as well as adverse impacts on the health of local population. So this is the single objective of my study, to access the spatial relationship between open dumping sites and influencing factors that affect unauthorized dumping in Kalaburagi city. So this is my study area. So it is located in the like Kalaburagi city is located in Kalaburagi district, which is in the northeastern part of the Karnataka state. So this is my study is based on the data which is collected from primary data, which I collected from using the GPS survey by the hand-based GPS waypoint. And I collected the existing open dumping sites in the study area, and like this is considered as the dependent factor for my study, and the independent factor is considered or the second considered from the secondary data which is collected from the municipal corporation. Like already one survey is happened in municipality. So the various factors: road network, open sites, commercial areas, population, residential dwellings, religious places, parks and playgrounds, industrial location, healthcare facilities, and education institutions which may affect the unauthorized dumping will be considered like independent factors. So this is the methodology of my study. Like I collected the open dumping sites, like the unauthorized open dumping sites location by the GPS waypoints app, and as well as I took the secondary data from the municipality, like that 10 influencing factors which may affect the open dumping site. And these data were converted to, like this will be the points data, and for spatially analyzing, these data were converted to kernel density using ArcGIS. And again, this kernel density is converted back to, this raster data is converted to points for analyzing by OLSR as well as GWR. So for the GWR, spatial autocorrelation also done using global Moran site. So these are the result which I got. So we can see that from this map, it is clear that how unauthorized dumping sites is present in the city, and this kernel city is showing that spatial heterogeneity among them, and it is not evenly distributed. Like some area we can see that higher concentration of unauthorized dumping sites. So these are the depending factors which is done like kernel density. Like we can see that obviously road network will be highest, and the open sites, the road network will consider all the road network in the study area. Open sites means the recreational activities happen. Open sites will be the sites will be open or vacant, and the commercial entities will be the areas where like banks, hotels, shops will be included. And the density of population, which also got like a point data, and that also converted to raster data. And the residential dwellings, like that the people were residing. So it will be the various type of houses, hotels, hostels, lodges, etc. And the religious places, it will be of any religious also considered. And the parks and playgrounds considered an industrial location. So we can see that industry is located majorly on the, some part of the area, and the healthcare facilities, which include government as well as public and private, everything included, and also the location of educational institution that will include the private as well as the government and private tuitions also included. So this is a statistical characteristics of the open dumping sites like dependent variable and independent variable, which is showing that there is a spatial heterogeneity exists. So after that, okay, sorry. So after that, OLSR, like ordinary least square regression, is done using the Microsoft Excel. So this is the result of that, like with a R square value of 0.26, and we can see that road network have higher influence on the open dumping sites with a value of 0.77, and it is and another value is followed by parks and playground have relatively lower influence. It's also a positive influence on religious places, and commercial areas have relatively lower influence, and educational institutions have comparatively negative influence on the open dumping sites. So after that, Moore psi is calculated to find there is a spatial autocorrelation exists. So it is found that there is a strong spatial correlation exists, then the GWR is performed. So these are the result of GWR. So with the NIBS of 120, the GWR is performed and got adjusted R square value of 0.89, which is comparatively higher. So, and we can see that while performing GWR, we can see even the different values of different R square value will be there. So it is varying from 48% to 91%. It is not will be uniform all over the city area. So GWR result shows that steady area exhibits a variation in local regression with all 10 factors demonstrating both positive and negative coefficients. So we can see that each factors have like positive and negative. So here also I got that road network have higher positive coefficient estimates like 72.3% area have higher positive coefficient estimates for the road network, and negative will be 27.7, and for open sites, which is positive coefficient estimates of 63.1 and negative coefficient estimates is 36.9. So, and for commercial areas, which is positive. So these are the major findings of the study. Both the OSLR and GWR analysis show that road network has higher positive influence in the study area by the open dumping sites. OSLR analysis shows that education institutes has a negative influence, while in GWR shows major area with a positive influence. In OSLR analysis, residential areas has slighter positive influence, while in GWR, significant residential dwelling areas with a negative influence. In OSLR areas, parks and playgrounds, religious places and commercial areas have positive influence. While in GWR analysis, commercial areas, open sites, industrial areas, religious places and population exhibit a positive influence over a broader spatial extent, while healthcare facilities and parks and playgrounds show a negative influence. So I want to conclude that this study found that in contrast to OSLR, GWR provides information on the specific local effects of a factor on the open dumping sites in Kalaburagi city. Therefore, while considering the planning waste management initiatives at regional level, it should be better to consider GWR, which will help to potentially reduce by allocating various number of waste bins in the study area. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions, please, from the audience? Yes. Can anyone give the microphone? Microphone, please. Yeah.
Did you take the types of residential area? I mean, the posh areas, income-based areas, because that would be an impacting factor.
Yes, ma'am. That will be an impacting factor, but I consider like a single factor. All residential values will be considered as single. Like if it will be not, the data will be available like that, like posh area or on the income level we can study on that. But I consider like a residential areas will be considered like a single area, like a single points file.
Okay. Okay.
Any more from the audience?
I have one question. Just you have used the all data. Actually, there is no sources of any data. Is it all of the primary data or?
Sir, I already explained. The primary data, like for dependent variable, like unauthorized open dumping sites, which I done a GPS survey using hands-on device, and the secondary data, like independent variables, I got the data from the Kalaburgi City Municipal Corporation.
Last question, please.
Whether you have done univariate or bivariate Moransai?
Sorry, sir.
Your result is 0.99. Is it univariate or bivariate?
Moransai, you are saying, sir?
Is it univariate or bivariate? Bivariate Lisa you have done?
Sir?
Local indicator? Special analysis?
Sir, I calculate this using RGIS.
Global Moransai. Then you have done the OLS and subsequently you have done the GWR.
Yes.
Where all the coefficients you have maintained. So I think the bivariate Lisa will be more appropriate according to
Okay,
you.
sir. I will consider.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much. Now, we'll listen to Anupama Chandran. She will be speaking on assessing the living conditions of fishermen households, a case study of Ernakulam district in Kerala.
Good evening all. I am Anupama Chandran from Central University of Karnataka. So my study is titled as Assessing the Living Condition of Fishermen Households, a case study of Ernakulam district in Kerala. So we all know that fishing is an important income source contributing to the livelihood or economy of the fishing communities who inhabits the coastal lowlands. And this living condition of these communities are directly influenced by this income level which they obtain from the fishing activity and allied activities. So, such households with lower income have restricted capacity to access essential services which affects their quality of life. In developing countries like India, the disproportionate growth of population and also health facilities have a negative impact on the quality of such poor community. So with this, I aim to assess the living condition of the fishermen households in Ernakulam district in terms of housing condition, access to electricity, toilet facilities and poverty line status. So here we are going to discuss three parameters which can be aligned with SDG goals. First, the housing quality related to the parameter housing type which reflects the structural integrity and the safety of the living spaces. And the access to electricity, which is a very basic requirement for every community who aspire for the modern living and which also impacts their education and economic opportunities. And finally, access to toilet is a critical factor that impacts our sanitation and health. And BPL status, the household which below the poverty line, is an economic measure that provides insight into a household's financial vulnerability and also their ability to access various basic services. So my study area is the Ernakulam district, which is located in the central part of Kerala, and it has a coastal length of 46 kilometers and it is stretched along 21 coastal villages where the inhabitants are dependent on the fishing activities or allied activities. And the data set is derived from the Marine Fisheries Census 2016 provided by Center for Fisheries Marine Research Institute. And it is analyzed using RStudio software. Mainly two types of analysis has been used, correlation and regression analysis. So let's look into the general profile of the study area. there are 21 villages which has a total household number of 10,467. Among them, 8,437 families are traditional fishermen households. So this is a general profile of the households which are below poverty line. And as you can see, there are many villages like in Chellanam, Cherai, Nayarambalam, Ochanduruthu, Pallipuram, Palangad, Saudi, where more than half of the households in the total percentage of households are below poverty line. And this graph shows the distribution of facilities by village wise. We'll be looking into detail. So first parameter, toilet. Here the pie diagram shows that only 5% of the total households are there with lacking toilet facilities. However, we can see that a significant number of households in villages like Chellanam, Nyarakal and Nayarambalam has lacking toilet facility. And all households in some villages like Saudi, Fort Kochi and Palangad have complete toilet facilities. And next one, access to electricity. It is very significant that there is 99% of households in the study area is completely electrified. However, we can see that a significant number of Kandankadavu and Munambam villages are not electrified. And coming to house type, there are mainly two types, Pakka and Kacha types identified in the study area, where 9% of the people are inhabited in Kacha houses. And coming to the Kacha houses, like some villages like Edavankadu, Ayyampalli, Cherai, Chellanam, Kandankadavu, more than 10% of the people are still living in Kacha houses. So to understand the relation between the poverty line status and also these parameters, I have employed the correlation analysis, and the correlation result between the BPL status and households lacking toilet and also the BPL status with Kacha households shows a fairly strong positive relation. So considering these two parameters, to explore the relationship more deeply, regression analysis also been performed, and the result shows that the BPL status is a significant predictor for both Kacha type households and also for the households lacking toilet facility. So coming to major findings, the coefficient of the BPL status is larger for households without toilet than the Kacha type household, which shows that this BPL status can be a stronger influence on the likelihood of households lacking toilets. So this lack of toilet can be directly related to the BPL status because such households which are poorer have greater economic challenge to access such facilities. So therefore, we can conclude that this BPL households in the fishing community should be a priority target for improving such living condition, especially in sanitation and housing quality. We all know that Kerala tops in the HD, Human Development Index, among all the Indian states, and also the state has a low poverty ratio. However, despite of all these achievements, a notable portion of the Kerala's population continues to experience this poverty. So around 68% of the total fishermen in the state still falls under the BPL category. As in our study area also, among the 21 coastal region, we have seen that more than 12 coastal community have BPL, more than half of the total percentage of household. So as Professor Amartya Sen said, poverty is not just a lack of money, it's actually not having the capability to realize one's full potential as a human being. So I think that a study house, not a Kacha house but a Pakka house, is very essential for such coastal communities which who are constantly facing so much threats from the sea. So I will be concluding by stating that a well-built resilient home with toilet facility for such community is a necessity but not a luxury. Thank you.
Thank you. You didn't even complete the first slot of 8 minutes. That's great. Questions from the audience, please? Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Congratulations, Beta. It's a very nice presentation and placed within the context of SDGs. It's a good initiative. My question is that when you run the correlation analysis between your variables and the BPL, so the BPL, whether the family, one household is BPL or not, must be a binary data, no? It must be a binary data.
Yes.
So is correlation the right statistic to be applied in such a case? Because I understand you've run Pearson's correlation. So the data type should be ratio data,
Yes.
not a binary data. So isme bhi aap just, you are saying that 65% of the households are BPL, whereas you have shown that pie chart that only 5% of the houses, they don't have a toilet. So actually, then such a high correlation, maybe, no?
Yes.
Most of the households are BPL and only 5% are not having a toilet.
Among total percentage of household, it's true that only 5%. But,
Yeah. That means
coming to some
63% of the BPL houses have a toilet.
Yes, but
So-
coming to some villages, this concentration is high. The people lacking toilet. Right?
Okay. Any other question from the audience? No. Judges, please, if you have any question.
Anupama, I just wanted to know, what you're trying to show that toilet facility is low among the BPL. It's a very well-known factor. So what is new in your work?
Actually, ma'am, I have a very limited data, and I realized that there was no region-specific studies has conducted like this, especially related to the coastal communities. So actually, I wanted to give a try to apply it in a coastal village level.
Any more from the judges? Or even from the audience? No. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So we move to the next one. Mintu Saini. He will be speaking on the relationship between air pollutants and meteorological parameters, a geographical analysis of Jaipur city.
Good evening, everyone. I am Mintu Saini from Banastali Vidyapit School of Earth Science, Jaipur, Tonk, Rajasthan. I am presenting my research paper, The Relationship Between Air Pollutants and Meteorological Parameters, a Geographical Analysis of Jaipur City. So, my introduction is, air pollution is becoming a global concern and critical environmental challenge and posing significant health risk, be it respiratory or cardiovascular disease. As WHO report suggests that 98% of the city in lower or middle low income countries fail to meet air quality standard. And 2021 IAQI reports also highlight that out of 30 most polluted cities, 22 cities are in India. And we see the famous case of Delhi air pollution as well. But air pollution is problem of all city, but the intensity it different. Like in Mumbai, that larger than Delhi, but Delhi has the worst air pollution compared to Mumbai. This is because of the meteorological condition like wind speed, temperature, humidity, and precipitation. And to address this problem, we need a multifaceted approach that include air purifier technology or vertical gardening or sustainable and integrated transport system. The objective of this research is to analyze the air pollutants concentration of Jaipur city over 5-year periods from 2018 to 22, and also show the seasonal pattern of major air pollutants and the relationship between the important meteorological parameters and air pollutants. So, data for this research, I use PM particulate matter 10 and NO2 and SO2 from 6 stations out of 9 stations in Jaipur city from January 2018 to December 2022. And for meteorological data, monthly average data of temperature, precipitation, relative humidity, wind speed, and air pressure from 2018 to 22. I obtained it from NASA Power Lab. And for data analysis, first I computed descriptive statistics of both air pollutants and meteorological data in SPSS, mean, mode, median, and then for trend analysis, I used tables and graphs, polylinear graphs of 5 years. And to show the relationship between the air pollutants and meteorological parameters, Pearson correlation method and coefficient of determination was also calculated. So this is the result, the descriptive statistics, and then yearly trends of air pollutants concentration of Jaipur city. So in this, from 2018 to 22, we can observe that in 2020, NO2 and NO2 concentration had dipped, and also PM10 also dipped. This is because of the COVID-19 and the transportation system was completely off during that time. So that effect also seen there. This is the graph that show the year-wise trend of pollutant concentration in city. So in 2020, all three pollutants significantly decreased, especially PM10 concentration and NO2. And this is the seasonal concentration of air pollutants. From 2018 to 2022, I divided the whole year in 4 seasons: pre-monsoon, monsoon, post-monsoon, and winter season. And in all these seasons, the monsoon season, all three pollutants decrease significantly compared to the winter season as well as pre-monsoon season. This is due to this is the concentration of air pollutants in graph, and there is a relationship between the air pollutants and meteorological parameters. So I use Pearson correlation matrix. So among pollutants and meteorological factors. So individually, temperature has a strong negative correlation with NO2 and SO2. The value is minus 0.81 and 0.82. Where is R square value coefficient of determination of temperature while putting temperature as independent variable, and NO2 it's 0.656. That means around 65% of concentration of NO2 can be explained by the temperature as a factor. Same for SO2, R square value is 0.672, or the 67.2% can be explained. Whereas temperature and PM10 so low negative correlation value. That means temperature does not affect PM10 concentration significantly. And same for relative humidity has moderate to low correlation with NO2 and SO2. The value is minus 0.49 and minus 0.51. Whereas R square value also relatively low, 0.23 and 0.256. That means the relative humidity has relatively low impact on concentration of NO2 and SO2. Whereas relative humidity has a strong negative correlation with PM10 as value minus 0.87 and R square value is 0.764. That means relative humidity affect PM10 concentration significantly. And wind speed has a strong negative correlation with NO2 and SO2. The value minus 0.70 and 0.74. And R square value for NO2 and SO2 are 0.494 and 0.54 respectively. That show the moderate effect of wind speed upon NO2 and SO2 concentration. Whereas for PM10, it's relatively very low, 0.22 and R square value 0.05. And precipitation has a strong negative correlation with all three air pollutants, NO2, SO2 and PM10. The value is 0.73, 0.80 and 0.88 respectively. And coefficient of determination for all three pollutants, it's above 50.5 or the 50%. So this shows that precipitation has a strong inverse relation with PM10 concentration in Jaipur city, as particulate matters are composed of soil or dust. So the water or during precipitation, all these particulate matters settle down on ground. And air pressure has high degree of positive relationship with NO2 and SO2, 0.93 and 0.95 respectively, with moderate on PM10. As higher the air pressure, that means in the city, the higher the concentration of SO2 and NO2. And for this study, there is certain limitation because the air pollution monitoring station was located within city was taken. Out of 9, 6 station was taken. So it's Jaipur city municipal boundary also taken, and only 3 pollutants were taken in this study: NO2, SO2, and PM10. And for meteorological data, only 5 meteorological parameters were taken. And for conclusion, seasonal trends indicate the higher pollutants level during the winter and pre-monsoon period, whereas monsoon period reduced concentration during increased precipitation and wind speed. And there is observed decline on pollutant concentration during COVID-19 lockdown period, underscore the impact of human activity on air quality. And these insights are helpful in formulating the strategy for air quality management in the major urban center of India. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 hands from the audience. Please give the microphone to.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a good presentation by Mr. Saini, young scholar. I have one question and one observation.
Yes, sir.
Since you are starting your PhD, you have showed that moderate R square value for SO2, NO2, but strong R square value 0.8, 0.9 for the PM10. So does this wind blows separately for the 2 pollutants? All the pollutants, SO2, NO2, yeah, whatever you say, PM10, PM2.5, is all there. Yes. So wind speed will blow equally to all pollutants. Yes, I don't get why this moderate R square value for that, SO2, NO2.
Sir, NO2 and SO2, the size of the pollutants, the particulates may be smaller. That's why it's impact on wind speed.
You should be sure, why not maybe. And second, my observation is that you have taken 10, you have not taken PM 2.5. So it is always good to have, when you are taking particulate matter, there are different particulate matter, 2.5, 4, 5, 7, 8.
Yes, sir.
So when you take particulate matter, better you take 2.5 and 10. If you want to take only 2, then take these 2. You can omit SO2, NO2, anything. One last observation is that once you are showing for the Jaipur, being a geography student, you should give, present in a special dimension. You should interpolate, take the maps, and you take the handheld samplers. You can borrow from somewhere and take the samples. If it is IMD data is not there and CPCB data, street pollution control board data is not there, you take the pollutant and then interpolate in a JS4. So that will give you a better presentation. 2-time data, take the 2-time data. And the last says that if you say that pollutant is high and low, you take the AQI. Whatever the parameter you take, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, you generate the AQI and then you plot it. So these are my suggestion to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to request that we don't entertain suggestions. We only ask questions.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I didn't know this format here.
That you can always give him just after this.
It's a nice presentation. My question was that you have taken the data from automatic weather quality monitoring stations and the other meteorological data from the NASA website. So were you able to get the meteorological data exactly for that coordinate where the automatic weather station is located?
Yes, I take for Jaipur city coordinate, ma'am. In IMD that was not available because they had a long process.
So actually, if it was not for the exactly the same location, then I think the analysis is compromised because, and within the, I think, okay, no suggestions. So have you considered the, like the volume of the traffic or time of the day, that also?
Yes, ma'am, I will include in
okay, later on. Okay.
Peak hours and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to the next presentation by Gautam Elangbam. He will be speaking on understanding the spatial variability and temporal evolution of climate change vulnerability in Manipur, India, a district level analysis.
Good evening, everyone. My time starts now. My name is Gautam Elangbam. I'm a research scholar at the Department of Geography, Manipur University. The title of my study is Understanding the Spatial Variability and Temporal Evolution of Climate Change Vulnerability in Manipur, India, a district level analysis. In this study, I would like to investigate the dynamic nature of climate change induced vulnerability over space and time. The northeastern hills of India, forming a part of Indian Himalaya region, are experiencing climate change at a rate higher than the global average. Previous studies have highlighted the decline in rainfall, variation in monsoon, and intense and extreme frequent weather events. The impacts of climate change on society, the economy, and the environment are determined not only by the magnitude of climate change, but also by the various factors induced by human activities. Vulnerability, which dictates the extent of climate change from the climate, vulnerability which dictates the extent of climate change damage, which is a very complex concept that encompasses the three interrelated dimensions, that is exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. Many factors contributing to the vulnerability are dynamic, particularly in the hilly regions of Northeast India. In this study, multi-dimensional climate vulnerability are integrated using the composite indices developed through principal component analysis and advanced geospatial techniques to assess the climate access and map both spatial and temporal variation in climate vulnerability across the district of the Manipur. The novelty of this research lies in the focus on the dual focus on spatial and temporal dynamics that offers a more comprehensive understanding of vulnerability evolution over the time. The specific objectives are: number one, to determine the specific dimension of vulnerability, whether it is social or climate, that each district is more vulnerable. And second, to identify the most vulnerable district in each decade. And finally, to capture the spatial and temporal changes in climate vulnerability over decades. This is the map showing the location of study area. Manipur belongs to the northeastern India. The state comprises of 9 districts during the 2011 census, but increased to 16 in 2016. But for the convenience of the study, only previous 9 districts are used in this study. The study utilizes the Climate Vulnerability Index to evaluate climate change vulnerability in Manipur, which aggregates the climate exposure and social vulnerability. The climate exposure is assessed using the Climate Index CI, which incorporates 6 indicators reflecting climate variability in extreme. The social vulnerability is measured through the Composite Social Vulnerability Index, CSVI, which is divided into SEBI, Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index, comprising 12 indicators addressing the demographic, economic, and social factors, and IVI, the Infrastructural Vulnerability Index, consisting of 5 indicators related to access to essential services and resources. This integrated methodology facilitates the assessment of spatial and temporal variation in climate change vulnerability across the districts and decades. This is a methodology flowchart. The selection of indicators are based on previous literature, data availability, and relevance to the local study area. And data were collected from various secondary sources such as Census of India, Statistical Handbooks of Manipur for socioeconomic and infrastructural variables. For climate variables, data were collected from the Indian Water Resource Information System and WorldClim, which is based on Climate Research Unit dataset. Since the data were obtained from various sources in different scales, normalization was employed, and principal component analysis was performed to assign weight for index calculation. SEBI and CI are weighted addition of the components, while the component factor is used as the IBI value, and CSBI is calculated by the combination of CBI and IBI using the components as a weight, and similarly CBI is calculated by aggregating CSBI and CI using the components as their weight. Classification of the CBI and sub-indices are based on mean and the standard deviation to have more better interpretation, and the ANOVA analysis was conducted to identify the interdecadal changes of the CBI and the sub-indices. These are the indicators used in the study. The first set of variables are economic indicators, which shows a positive and negative relation in the indicators. Positive means those indicators which increases the vulnerability, while the negative one decreases. Except literacy rate, all the indicators in the socioeconomic increases the vulnerability, while the second group of variables are infrastructure indicators that has a negative relation to the vulnerability, and the third group of indicators are climate indicators, which also have a positive relation to the vulnerability. For those indicators having a positive relation, equation 1 is used, and for those indicators having negative relation, equation 2 is applied. And the following table shows the major components derived from the PCA. 3 components are extracted from the socioeconomic indicators. Only 1 components are yielded from the infrastructure indicators, and again 3 components are extracted from the climate indicators. All the prerequisite conditions were checked to perform the PCA, like such as commonalities, Bartlett, and KMO tests. These are the results obtained from the analysis. In the socioeconomic index, it shows that Tamenglong is the most vulnerable district in 1991 and 2001, followed by Senapati, Chandel, and Ukhrul. But in 2011, Senapati becomes the most vulnerable district ahead of Tamenglong and Ukhrul. The spatial changes are shown in the map. The major factors including marginalized population, female-dominated, low literacy, high agricultural dependency. Second is the infrastructure vulnerability index, which shows that Tamenglong is the most vulnerable district in 1991 and 2001, followed by Chandel and Senapati. However, in 2011, Ukhrul overtakes the top spot, followed by Tamenglong and Chandel. The main reasons of high vulnerability includes less accessibility to the infrastructure. The combination of socioeconomic and infrastructure gives the composite social vulnerability. It shows that Tamenglong remained highly vulnerable in 1991 and 2001, followed by Senapati and Chandel. There is some changes in 2011. Senapati overtakes Tamenglong and Ukhrul. The major contributors for high vulnerability are high agricultural dependency, majority population living in rural, rapid population growth, and less accessibility to the infrastructure. Here is the climate exposure index, which shows the opposite characteristics to those of the social vulnerability. Bishnupur remained the most vulnerable district in 1991 and 2001, followed by Chuchampur, Chandel, and Imphal West. Interestingly, in 2011, Imphal West takes the top spot ahead of Chuchampur and Bishnupur. The major contributing factors for high vulnerability include change in minimum and maximum temperature, variation in rainfall, number of heavy rainfall days, and change of monsoon. Now, by aggregating the CSBI and CI, the climate vulnerability index is obtained. This gives the final verdict of the climate vulnerability of the state and also the dimension to which each district is more vulnerable. Chandel remains the most vulnerable district in 1991 and 2001, followed by Chuchampur, Bishnupur, and Tamenglong. In 2011, Chuchampur became the most vulnerable district, followed by Senapati and Tamenglong. Here is the dimension of the vulnerability considering both social and climate. Chandel, Senapati, Tamenglong, and Ukhrul are more vulnerable to social dimension, while Bishnupur, Chuchampur, Imphal East, West, and Thoubal are more vulnerable to climate dimension. This is the table showing the number of districts falling under different levels of vulnerability for various indices considered in DSD. In SEBI, the number of highly vulnerable districts is decreasing, but the population remains stagnant. In IBA, number of districts and the population percentage have decreased. The same characteristics of SEBI is shown in CSBI. The number of districts and the population percentage are changing in CI, but the number of population percentage is increasing. Finally, in CBI, though the number of highly vulnerable districts has decreased, the population percentage is increasing. Here is the ANOVA result of decade-wise CBI and sub-indices. The highlighted figures are the significant and non-significant changes between the decades. SEBI and IBA have values have decreased, which gives the output of decreasing Composite Vulnerability Index. However, CI value is increasing in each decade. The changes from 2001 and 1991 to 2011 is significant. This resulted in the significantly increased CPI in 2011 from 2001. The analysis revealed that the importance to consider both external and internal dimensions in assessing the climate vulnerability of the region. The study highlights the importance of district-specific strategies to address the complex interplay between socioeconomic climate factors. Recently, we are able to publish a paper on similar topic, but it did not consider the temporal aspect. That's why this study is taken up to assess temporal and spatial climate vulnerability. Thank you.
Thank you. Now this paper just now presented is open to questions from the audience first. Yes, please go ahead.
We have presented a very important aspect, climate variability. Do you think that the data you have taken from 91 to 2011, is it sufficient?
No, sir. Since data were based on the census, most of the data.
No. I'm talking about when you are talking about climate variability, na?
Okay, sir.
So for how many years you have to take? Do you know a standard?
So 30 years data were considered, sir. From 1961.
So you could have gone little back 70 something, 75.
Sir, I have shown it here.
No, this is my question.
Sorry.
You should have gone back. You could have stick to 2011,
okay,
but
sir.
you could have gone say 1971. This is one. And second is, do you feel that the what you are showing, the climate variability, they do follow the state boundaries or district boundary?
District boundaries, sir.
Do you think that any climate or weather follow the administrative boundary?
No, sir.
Then why did you show
for policy intervention, sir, policy implementation,
Okay.
district boundaries are the best option, sir.
Okay, thank you. Nice work.
Okay, thank you. Any more question from the audience? Judges, please. Yes.
Yes, Gautam, I just want to know, as it has already been asked also, climatic data has to be taken for stations, like how many stations you have taken for temperature and rainfall, and how you have interpolated them for districts. Number of rainy days you can take, but yes.
I have taken 3 seconds, ma'am. Like 3 seconds from 30 years. For 30 years,
No, how many stations in each district? Like rainfall has to be collected for stations. Temperature has to be collected for stations, not for the whole district. Do you get my point?
Yes, ma'am.
So how many stations data is available for Manipur districts? IMD must be collecting the data, no?
For IMD have a graded data, ma'am. For in that number of stations, only one for officially, and lot of locals data which are recently set up.
No, for that one station, can you take it for the whole district? And then that also you didn't tell whether it is monthly data. What kind of data you have taken for climatic variables?
Ma'am, I have taken the graded data of the IMD. They have interpolated in the graded. That's what I have taken.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the last presentation by Pravishka Rai. She would be speaking on exploring rural women's engagement in communities' health, a case study of self-help groups in Sikkim, India.
So, good evening, everyone present out here today. My name is Pravishka Rai, and I am a PhD student in Department of Geography, Sikkim University, Gangtok. And for today's presentation, I'll be presenting my work titled "Exploring Rural Women's Engagement in Community Health: A Case Study of Self-Help Group in Sikkim, India." So here is the outline of the presentation. And moving forward, I would like to start with the contextual questions. So how do rural women influence community health? And what barriers hinder the participation? And how do self-help groups play a significant role in community health? So this question strengthened this study as it aims to explore the women's participation in the community health program in the rural Sikkim. So to briefly introduce, as we all know, there is a health disparities all over the world, and achieving a good health outcome, especially in the rural area, is a very complex task, and particularly in the low-income nations. So due to its multifaceted natures related to healthcare deliveries, and this community participation, which is also recognized by the World Health Organization, play a crucial role in enhancing the healthcare delivery. So one such community participation, that is self-help group, which is mainly encompasses of women members, has been instrumental in health-related activities through health awareness and fostering community-driven initiatives. So this study seeks to contribute valuable insight towards reducing health inequalities, and also more importantly to enhance the effectiveness of community health program through self-help group in the rural, unique rural, socio-cultural rural context of Sikkim, in Sikkim. So literature has been reviewed thematically for this study on the themes like rural health, rural women's health and well-being, women's in rural community health through SSG, and association of health with women's empowerment. So after reviewing the literatures and building a conceptual understanding, so the conceptual framework has been prepared with the three themes, that is community programs, that is SSG, and women's empowerment and health and wellness. So this figure here shows the interconnection these themes has with each other. So moving forward, after that, here is the objectives of the study: to explore the women's engagement of self-help group in community health program in Sikkim, and to examine the challenges and issues related to women's participation in community health programs. So for this study had taken 3 villages, that is Kokale, Makha and Patuk of Patuk Simbel GPU, as you can see on the map. And this falls under the Rakdong Tingtik block of Gantok district, Sikkim. And the rationale behind the selection of this villages were the higher number of registered SSG in these 3 villages as per the National Rural Livelihood Mission data, and also their active participation in the community health programs. So for the data and methods, this study follows a qualitative research design, and sources of data were both secondary and primary. So secondary sources were government websites such as National Health System Resource Center, National Rural Livelihood Mission, research articles, books, reports, etc. And for primary sources were interview schedule, in-depth interview, and focus group discussion. And samples were divided into 3 sections, and the data were collected through 54 interview schedules, which is the 15% of 358 total SSG member of these 3 villages, and 10 in-depth interviews and 3 focus group discussions. So for sampling design, as I mentioned earlier, that out of 6 villages from the Patuk Simbel GPU, 3 villages were selected due to their higher concentration of SSG, registered SSG. And here, as you can see in the flow diagram, the sampling design of this, this selection of the study area. And moving forward towards the result and discussion, in-depth the interview schedule was conducted mainly for the understanding of the socio-demographic profile of the SSG members, and it shows the age group of 25 to 45 has a higher participation. They are mostly married, and they with occupations 57% are cultivators with education of secondary level, and they have been a member of SSG from 1 to 6 years, and 67% of the participants are participating in these community health programs in these 3 villages. And taking the insights from the in-depth interview, the purpose was to delve deeper into the perception, everyday experiences, and contribution of SSG members towards the community health program. So as one of the participants mentioned, quote, we go to all the houses in our area, raising awarenesses about sanitation and waste management, stressing the importance of cleanliness and advising against storing dirty water. So there are few more narratives which I like to skip, and this in-depth interview reflects a grassroots label that this SSG has been adopted, and the key takeaways are they have been practicing door-to-door campaigns to educate each household. BP and sugar tests, particularly targeting older individuals and pregnant women in rural villages, and challenges were also posed by limited connectivity of the roads in these areas, and which makes the immediate response difficult. And SHG members lacked formal health training, and also the dustbins were strategically placed, recognizing the link between the cleanliness and the health risk. So taking the insight from the focus group discussion, we can see the shift in the perspectives. They have been recognizing the collectiveness work as advantages. They have been collaborating with NGOs and block divisional offices and the panchayats. They have also taken the initiatives during the COVID-19 pandemics, like by crafting a cloth mask. And also there was awareness gap, and they're also seen individual efforts. So here is the success story. So now these members has been able to make a decision within the household. They are now more self-confident, and they are now participating in the local governance. And for community participation, they are showcasing leadership and economic empowerment, and they are also participating in the community health programs, such as one of such program is TB free mission in Kokoli village, one of the study area by 2025, and they have also been participating or involving in the environmental sustainability activities through like focusing on the sanitation and waste management programs. However, there are also challenges such as discouragement from the family members, feeling left out in the community, people might not trust women in health roles, and also feeling stressed with responsibilities and not knowing enough about the health and lack of time and funds. So how to deal with these challenges? As a researcher, I myself would like to place some recommendation to the concerned authorities, and the recommendations are train SSG members with the health skills, like at least with the emerging health issues, and replicate successful models, strengthen the government and NGO partnership, and also improve health, rural health assays, conduct regular health training, provide financial support to the SSGs, and support women's environmental and health role. So to conclude, this study says the light towards the significant contribution that women are playing in the community health program through SSG in this rural region of Sikkim. And this highlight a diverse experiences, achievements, and challenges faced by the women, and their crucial role SSG is playing in promoting community health, economic empowerment, and resilience during the challenging times. And it also highlights a transformative impact of SSG participation and health-making decision, family dynamics, and societal perceptions, fostering the empowerment and well-being of its member. And it also aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the SDG 3, good health and well-being, and SDG 5, that is gender equality. And here is the limitation which this study has, that is the time constraint, funding limitation, and geographical challenges. And also there is a future scope for this study based on the insight and findings, that is to expand to the multiple districts for comprehensive understanding, conduct in-depth analysis across other regions of Sikkim, compare SSG programs' effectiveness across different areas, and strengthen the partnership with NGOs and government bodies for impactful research. And here is the references, and thank you.
Thank you. You're just 4 seconds before completing this 10 minutes allotted to you. That's great. Questions, please. Yeah.
very nice study. And you showed a slide where you have shown that the women of a certain age group, a particular occupation, their marital status. So there's a clear mode in your histogram, yes. So can you explain this, that why the women of a particular age group who are married, predominantly cultivators, they are more active, having secondary education, but the ones who are more educated are not joining the self-help groups.
Yes.
So can you explain this pattern in the area?
Yes, ma'am. For giving the reference, there are very less references for me to cite. However, with the experience and observation from the field, women are very, educated women are prefers more towards involving in the other activities rather than being in the rural area and participate in the rural community programs. And these SSG members who are mostly from the rural areas are mainly those women who are housewives or they just are the cultivators, and they are mostly as a housewife they are married, so which reflects this graph.
Has there been any visible impact in the area regarding the overall health has improved, or has there been any visible impact in the area? Like the overall health status in the rural areas has improved, some particular diseases, the incidence has come down?
This area, these villages as I mentioned here, this in the second point of the community participation, they are participating in the TB-free mission in Kokole village, and this village has few cases of, not few, many cases of TB. So now they have came together to eradicate this TB from this village, and now they have been mostly successful. These women went to home to door and took the sputum. So sputum, collected the sputum and deliver it to the hospital for the test.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
It's a nice presentation. I have one query that in the suggestion part you have asked that regarding the economic empowerment, right?
Yeah.
You have given. So how in your study area that the women who are being involved in this self-help group, how this economic empowerment can be taken place? Because are they going on in a free of cost movement or?
Okay. So to answer this question, self-help group was basically started to empower women economically. So now it is expanded towards the health issues as well. So now women are, first of all, they have money, that the government gives. So with these approaches, they are now becoming economically empowered. So this conceptual framework was about that only. So to explain this, so this community programs like the SSG is empowering women, and this empowerment is leading to the health and wellness. When they are empowered, for example, in these slides, when they are empowered in the Association of Health and Women's Empowerment here, when they are empowered, empowerment improves the health access, and this economic opportunities boosts their healthcare spending also, and it overall strengthens the community and the family health.
Okay, and they are participating in this community health program. So are they properly trained by the doctors?
No. One of the, they are not properly trained.
So how they are measuring this blood pressure and all these things? Just because of they are not being trained?
They have been trained for that, basic things, but they are not trained with the skills taking this, giving injections and all. They are not. They can only conduct this BP test and sugar test.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all. We have come to the conclusion of the competition. 7 of you participated.
It's all right.
Congratulations to each one of you. I'm so thankful that all of you maintained time, and it was clinically precise by most few. And it was so well presented by each one of you. I know the judges may have prepared, ranked each one of you, and only one of you will receive an award. But as far as I am concerned, each one of you is a winner. It was a fantastic experience that we all had, and many of you faced tough questions from best of the minds present in this hall, including the judges themselves. Hats off to you that you could face such questions and answer confidently. That's what is important. And I'm sorry we couldn't take up suggestions for improvement. I'm sure you can, whenever you have some time, you can talk to very senior geographers who are present, and I'm sure they will be helping you in further improving the good papers that you have already presented. Thank you so much, all the 7 contestants. I also thank the judges. They have taken up a very big responsibility. I know they have a tough time to decide who would be the winner, who would receive the award, because each one of you is a winner. So thank you for accepting my request to act as judges for this event. I'm grateful to you for sparing your valuable time. I know it's a tough day today till 7:30. We are continuing from 9:30 till 7:30, something that is unheard of in any conference, but your patience is something that, that deserves praise. And I was also assisted by my student friend and colleague, Jason. When I was frantic, when I was nervous that we didn't have a bell, he came up with this idea that you don't need, in these days, you don't have to go for this physical bell ringing and all that. I'll do it. And he did it. And did it with great care and precision. And thank you, Jason, for having shown me a possible solution to a problem that we are faced with when we didn't have the facility immediately available to us. I also thank, who should I thank? The organizers, that includes me, to thank me for giving me this opportunity to chair one of those best sessions, most exciting one, in which each one is looking forward to listening to the presentation of these best papers that we selected out of 32 odd papers that we received as entries in the competition. And your help, your cooperation has made us happy in one respect, that we have completed this program ahead of time. We were given time till 8 o'clock, and we have still 10-12 minutes left. So thank you.
See, he is also our organizing committee members, but as protocol, on behalf of the organizing committee, I thank Professor Naik to chair this beautiful session on young geographers competition. And I also thank Jason Jarwa to help Professor Naik as the rapporteur of that session and to maintain the time properly. In the morning time, we were expecting that it will go late every session. But I thank you all the chairs and the speakers that we have almost completed on time. Now, this is the time for our general body meeting of the IIG. Please, 15-20 minutes time they will take. So I would request you to all of you to be here till the meeting is being completed. General body is all. Okay, those who are the IIG members, they should sit here, and otherwise the rest of the people, they are free to go. Dinner is ready. You can take dinner and can go. Okay, live members, yes. He told that all members. Yes, Professor Joy Bhai start immediately. यहाँ पे बच जाइए.
20 minutes.
साइन कर दो.
Done?
Okay, sir. 2-3 chairs. Here now.
Yes, that can be off. One microphone. I will
okay.
use.
अरे सची सर देखिएगा देखते अरे क्या हो गया मैं सची सर थोड़ा सा कि कंटिन्यूस कॉन्फ्रेंस इधर हो रहा है और वो जो बच्चे हैं ना उधर के वो वाइस चांसलर वगैरह सब के रिकमेंडेशन सबका ये दोनों को भी क्या कि देखो ये जो दूसरा कॉन्फ्रेंस है वो इक्वली है लोगों को क्यों लग रहा है वो कि एनुअल ऐसा है और ऐसे
শাটডাউন করে দিয়েছি কিন্তু দাঁড়িয়ে আছে যে এখন সবাই আমি রুম চেঞ্জ করতে পারছি
सच्ची सर
एक 5 मिनट
मिले सर सच्ची सर सच्ची सर
सच्ची कहाँ गई बुला तो ही मस्ट बी टेकिंग इट्स
हेमलता को
रूमवर गेले
कम
candidate is PhD from IIT Kharagpur.
एक दो बच्चे चाहिए थे बस थोड़ा अरेंजमेंट करने
मैडम से बोलते थे
कुछ भी
हाँ
नहीं कहीं नहीं शांति से those who are reading care में भी सब
वो स्ट्रॉन्ग पॉइंट समझ
दोन चेअर फक्त वरून चेअर तर मीच घेतलं होतं काय व्हॅनिटी पीस
काय करायचं
चेअर फक्त खाली घेऊ तीन आहेत वर पुढं बसतं ना
पण तुम्ही 4 सचिन सर तुम्ही
बाकी कोणाला
आणि नाईक सर
काय गरज नाही
नाईक सर
अरे चेयर नीचे चाहिए बड़ा नीचे चाहिए क्विक देना क्विक अच्छा फोटो निकाल रहे अच्छा सामान है यहाँ
बैठिए बैठिए चलो आप आगे प्लीज सामान भी उठा देंगे बैठिए प्लीज
हो गया फोन जिसका भी है फोटो मिल जाएगा बस
फोटो मिल जाएगा
ठीक है नहीं काटा भी नहीं बटा भी नहीं बहुत सारा खींच दिया हाँ? अरे उधर शेयर और किसका है
तुम आ जाओ you also come
पेन
you
आप एक
take
कीजिए
you take and he come
कितने चेयर चाहिए सर बस 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 ठीक आप लिख दीजिए भैया आइकन हो गया बस भाई साहब हो गया
चलो सच्ची सर
आप भी आइए सर
जय भाई जय भाई जय भाई हाँ हम लोगों का डिनर लेट हो रहा है
इसका कौन सा फोन
बूढ़े आदमियों का तो
करेक्ट
यू आर नॉट इन दैट एज ग्रुप आई एम इन दैट एज ग्रुप
मैं पहुंच रही हूँ उसकी तरफ पहुंच रही हूँ
पहुंचने वाले नहीं जब तक कि पहुंचो नहीं तब तक नहीं होगा लाइसेंस चाहिए
लाइसेंस चाहिए
मैं बैठ जाता हूँ
बैठ जाओ बैठ जाओ
बैठ जाओ दादा आ जाओ आपसे तो हमने पूरे दिन का काम करा मैंने हाँ
सच्ची सर को आगे बुलाओ प्रेसिडेंट को कैसे पीछे बिठाया आगे बुलाओ एक कुर्सी और लगाओ
नायक सर आप छूट गए नायक सर।
सभी इस तरफ आ जाइए ना। सुनील
नहीं, इनकी आदत है हमेशा भीड़ से अलग।
Okay, thank you so much.
सच्ची सर परदेसी किधर है? परदेसी सर
नायक सर ओके थैंक यू दैट यू क्या हाँ तो बता देना भैया जरा सा हम सलोन से आते हैं एकदम इधर आ जाए यार सारी दुनिया इधर है तू उधर बैठा हुआ हाँ सॉरी
दुनिया है मेरे पीछे।
Hello. So thank you all. Good evening and welcome you to the annual general body meeting of the IIG. I will hand over the mic to the General Secretary in order that we know what are the issues that we have to present here. So over to Jai Bhai.
First is the confirmation of the minutes of the last general body meeting was held in 23rd January. That is at the Department of Geography, Cotton University, Guwahati. So quickly I will just narrate some of the important thing about it. First was before that there was one meeting of the online meeting at Savitribai Phule University, and that minutes was confirmed in the general body meeting. Second was regarding the annual report of the IIG Secretary General, that was also confirmed in the meeting. Third one was the financial statement of the IIG for the last year's financial statement, and that was also confirmed. There were some proposals regarding the memorial lectures, and that memorial lectures were discussed, and that was also approved by the general body meetings. So these are some of the important issues, things discussed in the last general body meetings. So second agenda is reading and confirmation of the account and financial report of the IIG 2023-24. So I request our treasurer, Dr. Hemlata Patel, to say about the financial report of the IIG 2023.
Thank you, sir. So the total trust corpus fund till now in the last financial year was 41,76,678. In that, in the last year, for the life membership, the total added were 4,78,400. And for institutional membership, we had 65,050 that were added in the last year. Apart from the trust corpus, the income that was generated in the last year from annual membership was 1,33,400, and from subscription from different agencies and libraries was 27,440. On the expenses side, in the last year, the expenses were 2,92,881, where the expenses were for different budget heads like printing, stationery, administrative charges, postage charges, and account writing charges. So overall, seeing the expenditure and the income side, we were on the positive side of the income. Thank you so much.
So I think the report of the treasurer is accepted. Yeah.
Yes. Next is the just to brief up to the general body about some of the review of the various works taken by the IIG headquarters, and also about the review of the journal publication. So we have our managing editor, Dr. Avinash Kandekar. So please brief about these two activities.
Hello, thank you, sir. So in this month only we published 46 second volume, July 2024. Might be you may get the copy of it. As discussed in the last meeting, that we are basically trying to get the DOI number for transaction, and for that matter, so we communicated with the cross-reference agency and we basically got the one mail. So for that particular DOI number, we have to basically made some changes in our website. So as far as the landing page is the one of the concept, so if we opt for the DOI number, so we have to basically have that landing page on our website. So for that matter, we are basically planning to make some changes in our website, and at the same time we can basically have the platform at the head office only. So that is some changes we not there on our website. So we are basically planning to scan all the older papers, and very soon we can able to upload it on our website. Okay, that's it about the journal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash Kandekar. So next is we have the two memorial lecture. One is the Azazuddin Ahmad Memorial Lecture, and another one is the A.B. Mukherjee Memorial Lectures. So generally we discuss the names in the governing council, and that we inform to the general body. So there was discussion about the names. So for the A.B. Mukherjee, Professor A.B. Mukherjee Memorial Lectures, Professor A.K. Bhagwati sir is from the Guwahati University. His name is recommended by the governing council. And second name is, if some circumstances arise, so Professor Jaglan from the Kurukshetra University the name is recommended for the A.B. Mukherjee Memorial Lecture. There is another memorial lecture, that is the Professor Azazuddin Ahmad Memorial Lecture. But there is a committee from officials from the IIG headquarters, and there are the two, those who are the life member nominated for this committee. So they will conduct the meeting due course of times, and the name will be finalized for the Professor Azazuddin Ahmad Memorial Lecture. So this was regarding the memorial lecture. Then all you are aware about that election of the president for that is generally 1 year election. Only the last time it was happened because of Professor Sachidanand Sinha, he came with number of ideas, and we realized that to execute the ideas, so we should extend his tenure for the 1 year. But our discussion with the IIG, those who are the senior officials, so they said we cannot extend it, but that can be a re-elections. But then there was obviously re-elections, but only the nomination from the Sachidanand Sinha. So he was re-elected for the 1 year also. So, but again, next year actually his tenure is going to be over by April 2025. But during this only our annual meet, only we decide the next years after April 2005 to 2026 the president. So after discussion with or generally we ask those